Bonjour, je suis Mada, and thank you so much for having me. I'm one of the founders of Branch, and today I'll talk about mobile growth, and mobile hypergrowth. So let me tell you a story, and this is the story of Branch, but it actually started with a different company. It started with a company called Kindred, and we worked on Kindred for quite some time. We were in business school, we were students, we wanted to start this app, and after 4 months of development, and many of you who are trying to start your own companies, you know how hard it is to get a mobile app off the ground. And after 4 months of development, we launched, and we had 10 installs, and it was very depressing. And then we kept going and going, and we ended up actually getting featured in some of the app stores, and that was very exciting. But then once the app store features went down, we actually started kind of going down again, and we were going to the trough of despair. Then we raised some money, as all startups do, and we spent it all on user acquisition, and we're starting to get a ton of different installs, and we felt we were an amazing rocket ship again. But when we actually started to look at the unit cost, we saw that it didn't go that well, and it wasn't a sustainable business. And after some time, we ended up selling the business. So this is not, we couldn't figure it out. And the reason was this is not just our problem, right? When you think about the app stores and mobile today, there are so many, there's millions of apps that are being submitted across the world, trying to get the user's attention. So we ended up actually starting Branch to solve this problem. And I'm here on the Unicorn stage today to talk about our growth, but also talk about how we saw growth of many others. So just to give you a little bit about myself, I was born in Romania, so I am European. Ended up moving to the States to go to school, and then worked as an engineer and a product manager, and then started the app in 2012, ended up selling it and starting Branch in 2014. So we're about 5 years old as a company. So the problem that we saw, and I think when you think about mobile today and how mobile has grown and why it's so hard for a mobile company to get to unicorn status, to grow a lot, it's because when you think about the real world, it's actually incredibly messy. So you might be building an app, but the app is usually not enough. You have the different OSs, right? You have iOS and Android and tvOS and watchOS. You have multiple different types of devices on each platform. You have tons of different browsers, each with their own cookies, and they don't talk to each other, and then you have so many different channels. So when you think about growth, and when you think about setting up a growth platform, we think about this as, and what we've seen others do really well is actually thinking about it, creating a framework and thinking about every stage of growth, and that's how you can get a company to actually get to a unicorn status. So, you talk about cross-platform challenges, which are incredibly interesting, but then you have to think about all the different stages of growth, and do something to grow at every single stage, from acquisition to activation, virality, and measurement. And I'll spend a minute now talking about each of these and some interesting things that you could think of if you think about the growth of your company. But obviously, there's so much more that you can learn, and feel free to reach out to me after this. So when you think about acquisition, and acquisition is a very interesting one, the acquisition costs across cross-platform have really, really skyrocketed. So to get right now to get someone to actually download your app and do a paid subscription, it costs about $150 per user. So you need to make $150 per user to actually be profitable. And the hard thing about this, when you think about all these companies that are raising money, they're raising a lot of money, and they can show growth because they've raised, millions and millions of dollars, and they put it all in user acquisition. But when you look, and we've done this, because Branch is a linking platform, we actually try to look across all the large companies using us. And when you look at the retention rate of people that you actually acquire versus people that you get through banners or referrals, is actually really, really low over 30 days. So raising money to actually fuel our growth is not actually something that's incredibly sustainable. What is sustainable? What are some things that if you're here, you could try to fuel growth into your company? You could try doing something like banners and actually trying to get users from a website into your app. And actually customizing these works really, really well. So not showing everyone the same banner, but think about it like dating. If it's your first date, show them something very small. If they purchase something for you and you're going steady, show them something much larger. And we've seen large companies like Airbnb on the Knot use this to actually drive a ton of growth. Airbnb got over 3 million organic installs just from using this particular campaign. And when you look at numbers and you kind of compare banners that are static versus personalized, the personalized banners have twice the conversion rate, which, it makes a big difference when you're buying a click and the conversion from a view or click to install is actually double. The other one is obviously working with other apps and trying to find who are the right apps that you can work with to drive growth. So what we see when we look at companies that do really well, and this is an example of Spot here on Waze, is that they find other companies that are growing fast and they can do some sort of BD relationship. So in this case, if you're driving somewhere, Waze gives you the directions, and then they actually show you a specific spot, and you go directly into Spot Hero and you get your parking. A big one that people don't talk also about when you think about mobile is actually email. So I run these mobile growth meetups around the world, hundreds of them, and I always ask this question: what works really well for acquisition and retention? And people always say, email is something that people really don't look about enough. So one thing that I highly recommend is when you have an app, is to actually get someone's email address and use email to acquire them and re-engage them. Then the next part, which is also really interesting, is thinking about activation. And when I think about activation, there's something called the fog behavior model, which talks about when you think about activating a user, you acquire them, and now you're trying to get them to engage with your product. There's only two levers you can pull. Their motivation, how motivated they are to use your product, and then how easy it is to use. So the more motivated they are, it can be hard to use the product, and then the less motivated they are, you need to make it incredibly easy. Some things you can play with these are obviously working with referrals and incentives to increase their motivation. And the other one is giving them seamless user experience, right? They come from something, a friend invited them, and you give them a personalized onboarding, they're actually way, way more likely to sign up and give you their email. If they're looking for something, if they're clicking on an ad, making sure that you take them to the exact thing that they saw in the ad instead of taking them to a really long onboarding, so making it that easy. And then lastly, the one that I really like talking about is virality. I think if you think about the companies that grew and became unicorns, the thing that they all had in common is they were able to build incredible viral loops. And those viral loops are so much harder on mobile. If you have a mobile app, you need someone to click on a link and download the app. But you can do it well. And one thing that we've seen when we looked around these big companies that were able to drive virality, and it usually wasn't the incentives that drove virality, but it was something interesting. We had this dating app that was using us, and they had a wait list. So you had to go on the wait list, and if you invited someone, you went higher on the wait list. A stock app, who is also a unicorn in US, called Robinhood, did something super interesting. If I invite you to get to the app, when you download the app, you get this free stock, but you don't know what it is. So you have to go and open it and scratch it, and you're the last time I invited someone, I got a Facebook stock, which is worth quite a lot, and it was really exciting. And another time, I got a stock that was only worth $1, right? But that surprise is very interesting. And the last one, when it comes to virality, it's actually thinking about emotion. One of the biggest drivers of virality is emotion. So there's this book called Contagious that if you're trying to think about how to build viral loops for your own product, I highly suggest reading, that talks about all the different emotions that drive virality. And lastly, the most important thing when you're trying to drive virality is making sure that you measure and making sure that you don't just measure web and app differently, but you actually measure across web and app. So, when we think about the story and the story of Branch, it's an interesting story, right? We started as an app, and then we use all the learnings to actually build a completely different product that helped other mobile apps and other unicorns grow. I hope this gave you an interesting insight into both our growth and how to start thinking about your own growth framework and growth platform. And I'm Mada at Branch, and thank you so much for having me.